Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 discussion. Granny Games have just released the details of a patch that's going live very, very soon. Chances are by the time you're watching this video, the patch is already live. If not, then I got this edited really, really fast. Much faster than I was expecting. These patch notes went up with 30 minutes notice, and this is going to be a quality of life focused patch. There's a couple of pretty big quality of life things in it. As well as that, there's a number of minor balance fixes in here. These are balance fixes where monsters were egregious outliers. Like for instance, you'll see there's something that's been changed with one of the incarnations. One of the abilities was doing too much damage. And so let's go through this, starting with probably the most important one. Breach Hive Fortress encounters will now contain a skill that destroys all of the walls around Ilith, and this will be available from the start of the encounter. These walls are intended for people that aren't yet on a super strong character, so that they've got a fighting chance, so it's to slow down the monsters. However, a lot of people are getting annoyed by them, and Granny Games are just going to give you agency over whether or not you deal with them. If you're feeling like you're really, really strong, and you want the game to throw the monsters at you a bit faster, then you've got that agency now. But if you prefer to have some sort of training wheels on in the encounter, then you can keep those on. The encounter will take slightly longer, but it'll be more accessible. So that's going to be a big improvement. That is to the Breach Hive Fortresses. I would honestly really like to see this be added to the in-map Hive events as well, but that's not coming here. Now, patch 3.27 changed the makeup of Maven's Invitation the Feared, and we saw Chayula get demoted, Atsuri got demoted, Sirus got promoted, and the Incarnation of Dread got promoted. They're now part of the Feared. However, Sirus was not working very effectively in there. He's getting changed. So, Sirus will now use a wider range of his skills from the regular fights, so watch out for that, they could be quite dangerous. And he's also no longer going to have some of his anti-insta-kill protection that he has when you're fighting him in the regular Sirus fight. So all in all, if you're someone who is able to delete the Feared in basically no time at all, this is likely to make the fight easier. And if you're not able to do that, it's likely to make it a little bit harder. But chances are by the time you're fighting the Feared, you're ailment immune and you're corrupting blood immune. And at that point, Sirus actually isn't all that terrifying. Additionally, alteration orbs got a quality of life upgrade in 3.27.0. That is that when you're spamming alterations on an item, if you decide that for some reason you instead want to put an augmentation on, you can just hold Alt and that will work. Now, I don't entirely love this. There are times that it's annoying because Alt is also the key that is used if you want to expand out the details of a mod. So if you want to recheck modifier range, that can be sometimes quite annoying. Anyway, this is being expanded out to Orbs of Alchemy and Orbs of Chance, and holding Alt will use an Orb of Scouring in this case. The Orb of Chance one doesn't really matter very much because that tech was already added to the crafting bench. I guess in Ruthless, where there's no crafting bench, that might be useful there, but good luck getting enough Orbs of Scouring in that mode to do any sort of scour chancing. It will be useful with Alchemy Orbs, but it will also occasionally be annoying. I think in this case, it's actually going to be a better feature than it is with alterations. I would like with the alterations to have the ability to rebind that key so that I can still use Alt if I want to check, oh, is this actually tier 1? Or is this a tier 2 version of the mod? Or is this a perfect role for this mod? Or is this not a perfect role? So that I can do that without breaking rhythm. They'd be refinements that would improve that feature overall. But while with the Alteration Orb version, it can sometimes be a little bit annoying, I think that the Alchemy Orb and Scouring Orb one, and also the Chance Orb one, are just pure upside. The main thing here is that the primary reason you would be applying Alchemy Orbs to items is you're applying them to a map. And with maps, you don't really care whether you've got a min roll or a max roll. What you care about is whether you can do the mods or not. And you can usually see that straight at a glance. Now, we have the sales history filter coming up a couple of times here. There is an in-game version of this and there's an out-of-game version of it. I just want to remind people that if you go to the trade site and then have a look here in history, you'll be able to see a list of items that you've sold. So for instance, you can see I'm listing just a whole bunch of my low tier maps, and by low I mean 10 and down, at 1 chisel, and all of my 11s to 15s at 2 chisels. I'm just doing this because it's something that's convenient for a lot of people and because I use more chisels than I create. So this ends up being convenient for both of us. And you can see here that a bunch of these have sold overnight, as well as a couple of other things. So this is the good version of the history filter. The bad version is the one that's available in-game. The difference is that when you mouse over, you can see the details of the maps that you've sold, or not necessarily just maps, you can see the details of the items you've sold. However, this is not the case if you were to look inside the game client. Instead, all you'll see is the name. Anyways, all of that said about the sales history filter, a couple of little improvements to the in-game version of it, but they're not really substantial. Next is a couple of fixes for the in-game market browser. I'm not actually sure which items this one relates to. I would assume that Forbidden Shaco would have been affected by this. There's meant to be drop-down options for certain items, and instead of that, you would have a number that you'd have to enter. That's something that's being fixed here, as well as that, just a number of other really minor things that are specific to the in-game market browser. I generally use the in-game market browser for very basic things. Like just before recording this video, I bought 4 or 5 Voltaxic Rifts in order to put them into Rog's disenchanting window. And that's the sort of thing the in-game market browser is great for. For any really complex things though, I tend to do that from the trade site instead. There's a number of other minor bug fixes along those lines, but then we have something that's really significant here. This one is going to catch people unawares. Fix a bug related to Valdo Maps. Valdo Maps that have the feed in them. Sirus was just sitting there doing nothing and was also not required for map completion. This is fixed. Warning, this is going to make them much more dangerous. By the time you're even considering doing a Valdo map that has the feed present in it, you're definitely going to have ailment immunity and you're definitely going to have corrupting blood immunity. Otherwise, you will get absolutely annihilated by this. But even with corrupting blood immunity, even with ailment immunity, this can still be quite scary because Sirus's die beam does a fair chunk of damage. There are a couple of other little bugs related to bosses as well. Fix a bug where portals were unable to be used when fighting the feed in a Valdo map. There was a bug that was related to the Breachlord fight, and also the Incarnation of Dread when found as part of the feed encounter in a Valdo map. It was spawning chilled ground in the wrong location sometimes. So a bunch of nasty things there that are going to make feared encounters inside Valdo maps a little bit harder than they'd been, although at the same time, you will be able to portal out if you need to. After that, we have a Ruthless only fix. There was no loot coming from Uber versions of Incarnation bosses. That's being fixed. And then something that applies to a lot more people, and that is Incarnation of Neglect's Ice Nova Slam and Ice Comets were dealing more damage than was intended. After that, we have a few little small things that apply to those of you that play on controller. I'm not in a good position to judge whether these are significant or not, but there is now a leaf hideout option that's being added to the pause menu, and that applies when you're in someone else's hideout, only when using a controller. A bug is fixed where you couldn't toggle Scouting Report affinity in a currency stash tab while using a controller. Fix a bug where the Corruption Altar in the Val Ruins campaign area could not be applied to gem items while using a controller. This is the sort of thing I would never have suspected was going to be a bug until Grinding Gear Games come and fix it. And while using Orbs of Alteration, Alchemy and Chance, that tech is being added to controllers as well. You can now press Y or triangle to instead use the recommended alternate currency that you might occasionally want to weave in there. So that'll be Augmentation, Scouring, and Scouring respectively. And this will use things that are in your inventory, or if you're in an area that you've got access to your stash, then it will use ones from your stash if those are available. So those are the things that are coming here. Like I said, it's mostly a quality of life change, but I do think that the big scary things here are going to relate to feared encounters inside Valdo maps. Not so much this line, but the other lines that relate to them. Sirus is now going to work, and also the Incarnation of Dread is going to drop its bad ground in different locations. Chances are the chill ground doesn't matter if you're fighting Valdo maps again, but just be aware of that. Couple of nasty little changes, and the Incarnation of Neglect's ice abilities are being nerfed. Other than that, the biggest changes here are going to be Breach Hive Fortresses, the ability to get rid of the training wheels if you don't need them, and also you're going to have these changes to the behavior of Orbs of Alchemy and Orbs of Chance, which are going to be improvements in almost all situations, but I would really like the ability to bind this to a key that is not Alt, because Alt is one that has other relevance when it comes to seeing the mods that you've rolled on an item, and therefore to crafting in general. Gonna leave it there. May your Val Orbs have interesting results, and hopefully this patch goes smoothly.